Theoretically, could you convert a blank firing gun to launch a traumatic projectile round? Now, when we're talking about blank firing weapons or non-guns, blank firers, that could be a revolver that you get for $30 that takes 22 caliber blanks, or God help you, nail gun blanks. Or it could be 22, 35, 45 caliber, 9mm, all sorts of things. Or it could also be something really expensive that has a bunch of licensing and copyrights and design patents and crap associated with it, that has a reciprocating slide and it's semi-auto and in some cases full auto. They're usually driven by PAK, pistol automatic canal standard cartridges. These cartridges were specifically designed to make it so that the gun itself could not take a cartridge, and that didn't work because people figured out a way around it pretty quickly. They were also designed so that they would have a obstructed and or constricted pathway for the gases to exit so that a projectile wouldn't go through, and of course people figured out ways of getting around that. The ones that fired in a way that made it to where a bullet would never go through are called top firing, side firing, etc., where the gases don't come out in a straight line. Some of them are made to where it blows down so it emulates the kick. Some of them, however, are called front firers, and again, it has to have a constriction or bore change, a significant bore change, and or obstruction. And in the United States, it has to be both. Now, that doesn't keep the gases from getting through, and many of them are designed to optimize that gas flow for doing something useful, in order to make them legally sellable, especially the revolver types, that used to be from companies that made ones that could surely fire a bullet. They include an adapter that's for firing a flare cartridge. The inner diameter of it, and the name of it, is a 15mm for this adapter, for that type of adapter, but it usually uses a 14.5mm outer diameter flare star. And if you're not aware of it, it's a little aluminum cup with the flare material in it, and a little bit of gunpowder to act as a time delay, because the firing of the gases ignites it by burning it. It acts as a time delay for half a second, so it gets up in the air, so it's lights here, goes up, and then comes down. And I discussed that fact that you could, theoretically, put higher power blanks in these, depending on the type, and get them to go higher. I'm pretty sure a 45 caliber Packnal, pistol should be able to fire something higher. And you can watch a video where someone's shooting at something 50 feet away and missing, okay, if you want to fire the flare over land. They're supposed to be fired straight up. But obviously that doesn't stop a person from finding a gumball machine, getting a rubber ball and stuffing it in there and doing the experiment. And in these same areas where you might find one that's designed to take a rubber ball on purpose, they're sold because in that area you're allowed to have these, not just with the legally required social purpose of being a flare gun for emergency purposes, which sometimes is included just for lawyer reasons, but for real reasons, they might let you say, yeah, you can put a projectile on it as long as it fires below a certain number of pounds per square inch or foot-pounds or joules of energy or something like that, or feet per second, and you can fire rubber balls. And they might have one that has a bigger diameter. A lot of the time, it's just the diameter for the next size up for, not flare gun, which is about 14.5 millimeters again, or 57 caliber, like the flares you buy in the United States that come in that little stick thing that you see in PUBG. They'll make it 68.5 caliber, so it takes paintball gun diameter balls, which, if you're not aware of it, can be made out of extremely dense copper powder mixed into rubber, or just rubber balls, or soft rubber balls. Now, another alternative is, in some countries, they allow this specifically because you can buy a cartridge that goes in it that squeezes a very squishy bullet through this convoluted pathway. It won't take a real bullet, but it'll take the rubber bullet. It's basically a gummy bear. And that can be fired. And they sell them so that you can put in the big versions. This takes the pressure that's coming out at a fairly high speed. By the way, blank firing guns have a lot more propellant power than you might think. And it spreads it out over a larger surface area in the back of a larger ball and makes it come out slower. The total energy conversion is lost a little bit, but you get a lot of foot-pounds or joules. And the idea here is this is a deterrent. It makes a person stop attacking you. Maybe they'll run away. Maybe you can scare them. And in most places, you have a duty to flee, because standing there challenging someone means that you're a participant, mutual combatant, and you're just picking a fight, and now you're holding a gun. You're not going to get much sympathy that way. But if you run away, this will give you the time to do it. It should be pointed out that in cases where people have been hit with a larger diameter slug, like a deer slug that's made out of rubber like this, a big ball, almost never do they get killed. Unless you're like 3 or 4 inches away from them, 8 inches, that can kill them. There's a bunch of cases in France of somebody doing something like that. But if it's smaller diameter, they have a tendency of penetrating the skin and causing internal injuries and killing people once in a while. But the funny part is, or not so funny, is that when they're hit with these smaller pellets, like let's say the default thing from your pack gun that's shooting little rubbers, the person who's firing gets beaten up. If you fire a large bore one, they don't normally beat up the person who fired the gun because they're in pain and running away. Even if a person is hit with these rubber balls, there's another negative outcome. A lot of them died. There's a bunch of people who came into emergency room, trauma wards. Now I'm going to read back some basic information here. For around 40 euros, you can get the adapter and stick the rubber ball thing on it. Okay, we're done. That's the end of the video. And you can buy different diameter ones too. There's 50 caliber, 55, 60, almost 70, 71, 78, 20 millimeter all the way down to 12. You can also get a gun that fires on purpose rubber bullets that are 50 caliber instead of the 45. Now, the thing is, the risk of actually doing enough damage to go to prison for is much higher with the smaller diameters. So I'm recommending that if a person wanted to convert a blank firing gun to fire something other than gas, bigger is better because it's safer for you legally and also for the person attacking you and more likely to make them go away. Okay, now we get to the next step. A little bit of education. A steel BB, 18, 17 caliber, the little dinky ones, carry about 1 joule of energy if fired at around 245 feet per second. Now, the reason that's understood is a bunch of court cases have happened and liability lawsuits because BB guns can put an eye out. And literally, the penetration depth to get through the cornea, if you fire from 10 feet away, works out to almost exactly 1 joule or 0.7 foot-pounds. It's right around there from a BB gun. BB guns are normally limited to 300 feet per second because it's presumed that that will keep it below the level where you're going to have to deal with a bunch of lawsuits. I'm not kidding, that's literally where I looked this up. Now, coincidental, an air gun, they can get it up to 700 or 600 feet per second in this case. 600 feet per second firing a 5-grain steel BB gun pellet will produce around 5.4 joules or 4 foot-pounds. Now, that means that it has enough energy to penetrate muscle in a pig or a human, or ballistic gel, which is what ballistic gel is trying to emulate, 3.5 inches on average. It's a plus or minus number used for calibrating the gel. But because it's based on human muscle and pig muscle, and literally doing these tests in both to get the gel to work the right way, it's supposed to emulate muscle. Literally 4 foot-pounds will punch 3.5 inches. Okay. Air pistols are rated from 6 foot-pounds or 8 joules. Air gun, I'm not using the right terminology, but we don't have these designations, is around 12 foot-pounds or 16 joules. And now we're well above 3 times the depth needed to go into a chest cavity and hit an aorta. That was the rating for a air gun involved in a court case, 12 stinking foot-pounds. 14 foot-pounds for a pellet rifle is about the same range, 20 joules. That was the intensity level that caused someone to kill a grown-up. A child shot a grown-up and killed him because the pellet went in and punctured the heart and damaged the nerve that causes the heart to beat. He died because he went into ventricular fibrillation or something like that. Yeah. Put a hole in your heart. 24 foot-pounds, air rifle. This is where we're getting to the point where from 18 foot-pounds to 24 joules, up in that area, we're now talking about something you can go hunting with. Small game. And definitively, the upper limit where they stopped calling it an air anything, they just refer to it as a firearm in some countries and some states. Bullets that are fired from a cartridge with nothing in it other than the primer. 22 caliber long rifle or short cartridges can be rated as CB or BB flowberts. The BB type just has a round ball stuck in it, no propellant, and it has 35 joules or 26 foot-pounds. The ones that are called CB, they have a pointed bullet and they're more bullet-like, and they also have propellant in them, are rated to 40 joules or 30 foot-pounds. The next one up is the 22 short, which is definitively a cartridge that has taken people's lives, 60 joules or 44 foot-pounds. And then finally, at the next level, the 22 long rifle, which is notorious for, quote, having killed more people than any other cartridge on the planet. I don't even have the numbers on here because we're going to talk about the minimum kinetic energy likely to cause a casualty in the 1960s Army estimate. This is the infamous pine board or whatever test, which is inaccurate as hell. 58 foot-pounds or 78 joules, the 80 joule rule in Europe, where you consider the device, no matter what it is, no matter what its bore diameter, even though we've obviously shown larger is safer, at 80 joules, kinetic energy is the minimum kinetic energy to kill a person. They called it a casualty, but it's to kill. To very likely kill. And there is missing information like what was the diameter or surface area of the projectile, what cartridge were they talking about. It was a basic estimate on stuff. The hard or soft pine board or plywood half-inch or 1-inch penetration meme, because it's that variable I just quoted you, is in excess of the force of the projectile to likely cause a casualty that was briefly adopted for testing in the 1960s by the Army and thrown away because it was dumb. Because it isn't upwards of 60 foot-pounds or 80 joules like that says. Conclusion. Can you take a blank firing gun and use it to fire a projectile for the purpose of self-defense as a traumatic weapon to stop a person, stun them, and maybe make them run away, but definitively try to give yourself some time to run away? And can you do it in such a way that you don't kill them? Yes, use it large diameter, large bore, and it should hit hard. It should hit quick and bounce off. You don't want to penetrate the tissue, and you want to send them away, not to the morgue. Next, smaller diameters, even if it's literally 12 gauge double-aught rubber buckshot that was fired, generally killed people, but only after they finished beating the hell out of the person who shot them. However, shooting them with a rubber slug like you would out of a paintball gun, yes, I'm going there, but it was actually a shotgun cartridge loaded with it, made them stop and run away because they didn't want to be hit anymore, because they were scared, because it hurt, because it stunned them, knocked the wind out of them a little bit. It made them think about what they were doing and run away. Now I'm going to get to the obvious here. Yes, you can take a blank firing weapon and make it fire a projectile. It's convoluted. You can buy a special purpose, unpleasantly expensive paintball gun that happens to be rated up to 600 feet per second and throws one of these slugs, and they will work really, really well. Or you can get a cheap paintball gun loaded up with the round balls, beef up the design on it. You can even start with a plastic one and just make a metal version of it by just upgrading the parts, put a big tank on the back, overpressure it to where it can actually get up to 600, 400 feet per second would be likely your best bet. And you'll have more shots, waste less money, and it would work more effectively than using a blank gun. But if you want to, you can take your flare gun adapter, jam a bullet, or actually a rubber bullet into it, or buy a rubber bullet adapter for 40 euros and do the job. Do I believe that this is practical? Compared to a really simplified, not electronically triggered paintball gun. I really don't like the electronic triggering ones. That will work, but I do not recommend it. I recommend getting a hold of a compressed gas, like CO2-based gun that will do this. Can you make these yourself? Yes. But then again, you can also just make a 12 gauge and load it with rubber slugs. Depends on what you want to do. I'm strongly recommending the paintball gun or self-defense only compressed air gun that uses these rubber slugs. And I recommend you find the cheapest one on the market that's made for firing paintballs and just stick the rubber balls in it. I do not recommend using the blanks. But if you want to do it, it'll work. And it's been shown to work a lot better than what they usually provide, which is little dinky rubber bullets that end up killing people sometimes and they still don't stop. They just beat the shit out of you and then die afterwards. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. I hope this has been informative. And